All right, we'll call this meeting to order and start with the roll call.
Councilmember Hogan,
Present.
Member Moore, City Administrator Larson,
Present.
Public Works Director McPhee,
Present.
Engineer Thunderbird.
Present. Okay, so we will move on to the approval on the minutes from June 4th of 25.
Looks good. Thank you.
Good. Moving on to the public comments and presentations.
None.
Moving on to building department.
All right, as you'll see, pretty much our permits that went out this month or the month of June was the same as May. Currently, we have 5 projects in review, and all of those we're just waiting on information from the submitters. We have 269 active permits, 17 permits that are waiting to be picked up. Currently, in regards to code enforcement, we have 10 cases going on. So we have Rainier Meadows project is going on, the installation of utilities. Bridgewater, so they're getting close to finalizing their model home. Just kind of waiting for them to begin their submittal process. And then the standard, we have a lot of solar panels, people this time of the year really getting their ACs put in, so not wanting to have to put up with that this year. So then we have the charter bathroom. They finished the exterior walls. We have the roofing all up on that. So the Army has finished that portion of the project. And that is pretty much what we have going. Again, the normal smaller permits that continue to be processed, re-roofs and so forth.
Anything else?
We are nearly ready to finalize the plat out there at Bridgewater. We're circulating the face of the plat for signatures from the city right now. So we expect to have that done by early next week, and then come back before the county. And I would expect that soon thereafter we're going to start seeing a flood of building permits coming in from KB Homes to start construction on the 33 houses out there. Bridgewater. Yep.
Oh, yeah.
Yep. Okay. Yeah, so that's just an update on that one. Final plat's almost done.
So they've got everything finally approved how they wanted it. Okay.
Ready to do that.
Thank you.
Anything else? Evan?
Okay, so council goals, so the telemetry master plan is under new business. And then our other one is our water system plan and our general sewer plan, which are in process. Are there any specific updates on those? It looks like water system plan. You have one on the general sewer plan, Ryan?
Yeah, I can provide just a brief.
Okay.
When it comes to the general sewer plan, we've met with Wilson Engineering. They're still progressing the plan and have asked us to do some surveys of several of our different manholes throughout the city just to validate the modeling.
Snack thoughts here. So under admin, we have council had us telemetry master plan. We're talking about septic or sewer plan now.
Sorry, yeah, so there should be 2 goals, because there were 2 goals pertaining to public works. So one's on the agenda, so I'm not going to cover it right now. And then the other one's related to the compliance question. So
Sorry, go ahead.
But yeah, we're going to be doing some surveying of some of our manhole inverts to validate one pipe size and depths. That way they can identify any surcharging of the system for our future needs.
Mount that. A year ago. we had to do a sewer plan. I remember we had a sewer plan. We had a vendor that went through and looked at a bunch of piping in town and hometown.
Oh, so we did it, we camera the system to look for infiltration. But this is more of a survey, not just a pipe condition assessment.
Elevations of pipe sizes typically when you're dipping manholes to get the inverts and slopes between manhole to manhole, so they can put that into their model and determine flows and capacity analysis.
Okay, I guess I would have thought we would have done all that with the GIS work.
From what I could tell, like we'll have pipe sizes, but we won't necessarily have inverts to bottom of manholes from the data that I've got from the contractor that came in and did that work.
The big question I would ask would be then, now that we've surveyed our roads, since I've just in the last 2.5 years, we've looked at our roads, we've looked at our sewer. Number of projects, all these different things, and it seems like we've got all these people that are going out looking at the same things over and over again to collect one piece of data, but maybe there's 10 pieces of data, and why? What are we missing? How do we not repeat that process? And sorry, if we're gonna have them go out and look at stuff, can we find a way to like capture, figure out what quality? Part of what we're doing right now is sewer plants, so we can figure out, what we're dealing with.
Yep.
All in, but. Are we gonna revisit this next year or 2 years from now and say, well, let's go with this info? What can we do to capture as much as possible in this evolution and not have to repeat that? So maybe that's food for thought for another conversation, but it just seems like we're revisiting the same things repeatedly and spending money on it.
GIS is traditionally like surface level, pipe size material. Then as you get into modeling, things like that, you're getting into more specific down to the 1/10 of a foot survey grade. So I think that's probably what they're looking for, survey grade, because you're determining pipe slopes, you need pretty exact. So it's a bad analogy, but some people say GIS stands for get surveyed. When you're getting to more detailed design. So you're gonna continually, and things change, utilities, things like that. So project specific total surveys, you're gonna continue to need to revisit those. GIS is a great platform, and I'm sure all of your sewer model, your storm and water model will be inputted into that. So you'll have all that data once you have gone through these plans. But as you do to specific designs, you're still likely going to be doing detailed surveys for those individual projects as well.
Right, I guess the kind of bigger picture, I'm just looking at, if we're hiring parametrics to come in and do a project. Sure, you're not gonna have that limited scope.
Right.
If we have a GIS tech that's working in-house and he's going out and doing that, if you're taking the time to measure, why not go all in? Measure every manhole, collect all the data, then we have that repository, then we don't have to pay parametrics to come out and do an as-built. I mean,
Yeah,
that's where I'm going with that. So we've done a lot to improve our data collection rate and understand our system. So if that's just an add comment, it's just my thought.
No, I appreciate it. One thing that we're doing is we've gone through all of the different developments within the city, and those elements, we don't necessarily have to go back out and do surveys because we do have those elevations from the final plat documents. So we've already provided that. The areas that have less accurate data is the older part of the city, around City Hall, the central area primarily, and that's the area that we'd have to go out and do some surveying at those locations. Right now, I'm actually working towards interviewing a couple GIS candidates. I've got 6 of them that will be interviewing early next week, and then potentially hiring, hopefully by end of the month, offering a position. But we did note several holes in data. As JC mentioned, a lot of our information that's in our web map itself contains like the size of the pipe, but doesn't necessarily contain the age when it was installed and bury depth in some of those line item elements that are crucial for us to be able to provide to engineering firms. And we're going to be working to close that gap, but it may take a little bit of effort, both on that future GIS technician and potentially a little bit of support from our engineering team to help our GIS understand how to collect that data and then pretty much teach them so they can actually go out there and run with that collection technique with support from whichever utility needs to be there. So that's on my radar to make sure that we get even better data in our system. So when I get a request and I pull it up in our work management system, I can see exactly what size, what depth, everything's at. Definitely learned a lot of that when our guys went out to pothole Orville Road water line for WashDOT, so we could make sure that our plan is good. Those are some pretty deep lines out there compared to what we thought they were. So more to follow on that as we continue to develop our GIS and take it to the next level of complete accuracy. So.
On to engineering report.
Thank you. I'll go through as usual. Feel free to ask questions, interrupt. WashDOT Fish Passage projects. We had a good meeting with them earlier today. Ryan was on it with us, and so to nobody's surprise, they're behind schedule. So in order for us to start our work, and I think Ryan has the scope and budget for your review later today, later in the agenda. But we're relying on their 60% design when they set the alignment of the road, the structures, etc. They're currently anticipating that to be coming here soon and then marching to 90% in the fall, that they weren't super committal on that aggressive timeline. So we stay in coordination with them. We're meeting with them every few weeks. They're moving forward, but slowly with regard to that. So keeping in good contact, and it sounds like both the roundabout and fish passage projects will be going out to construction. They're hoping the first part of 2026, and we'll start seeing obviously the impacts associated with construction. Ryan, is there anything we wanted to add on those projects with regard to the agreements?
Likely we'll have two agreements, one for a little bit of design and then the construction agreement, which the construction agreement is probably the most important one for us. We would provide construction oversight during the water line work, but WashDOT would be the one that we would ultimately end up paying for the work being done. WashDOT will have a separate bid schedule put together by JC and the team, and then that's what we would be paying WashDOT, that portion. So it'll make it a little bit easier for us to some degree, but we'll provide an inspector. We'll be a part of the weekly project meetings through the waterline construction portion. And then once that kind of transitions out, we'll reduce our involvement and awareness in the project as a whole, because at that point, there'll be a lot more civil roadway type work going on that doesn't necessarily involve us until it gets to final grades and valve box can locations and stuff along that lines. So definitely looking forward to get that one moving and getting that scope and budget moving forward. But as far as the design goes, because the structural components of our water line are going to be hung on the side of the culvert boxes, they're going to need to do a little bit of engineering work on the ends for the earthquake restrained joints that have to go on there. And those are a little bit heavier than they were originally anticipating as far as the design goes. So it may need WashDOT's engineers to beef up the rebar inside that portion of the box. So that would be something that's additional cost for us to take on from the design and the construction of that project. So, but things I think are moving in the right direction. Probably more so in the last month and a half after I sent an email to them requesting, hey, we want to get this done. We want to keep the ball moving on our end. And all of the utilities are involved in the conversations now pretty much every 2 weeks, if not more frequent than that. So moving in the right direction.
Stormwater plan, we're gone through QC of the model, added some additional elements with regard to Kansas, specific to future conditions of the construction of the Kansas Street project. So getting that integrated into the model and going through QC of that. Water system plan, Ryan just sent us here today some hydrant testing that we're looking for calibration of the model on that. And so that'll help us finalize the water system model, current and future conditions associated with that. Been meeting with the city on the RRA, the risk and resiliency assessment, as well as the emergency response plan. And then also coordination with Ryan on 2024 water use efficiency numbers, production, water loss and water loss calculations. So a lot of back and forth coordination with that, meeting with the public works team every 2 weeks on that project. So moving forward well. And then go ahead.
And I will provide one update as it concerns the water system itself. While staff were out doing those flow testing, data collection, the system performed the way it was supposed to. The high flow pumps kicked on when they were supposed to, and we had great pressure and volumes available at any point throughout the majority of the city. The one location that had a little bit less pressure and volume just by nature of its location was the south side of So everything's performing the way that it should as we're doing some of those flow testing avenues. So it's good to see that system is working the way it's supposed to.
And lastly, city standards, moving forward on schedule on that. So you're gonna meet with the city on specific questions they have. That's all I have, unless folks have any questions.
A question on that, so with the standards, I know we've talked about doing like client assistance and all like Seattle in the past, is that at all part of that conversation?
No, these are just design standards and standard specifications, so water, sewer, storm, utility standards, roadway, sidewalks, that type of thing, and then upfront boilerplate plates, specifications in washout form.
JC, did you say construction in 2026?
It's anticipated schedule advertisement for the
Bid for? So how do we anticipate our budget for that?
So the water line's in the budget, I believe, already, so that's your only participation in that. Washouts and all the rest.
Okay, so we just pay for that part of it.
Reimbursement base, so their contractor will do all the work, which is much cleaner. We'll provide a bid set in their template, that just essentially adds on to their plan set. So the contractor bids one set, one continuous contract that Washout manages with city oversight.
Okay, thank you.
With the cams, I think that you and I have talked about that before. It's a little bit less related to JC specs and more like, you know, walking somebody through the appropriate application process or some of the other, you know, kind of more land use side of things. So that is definitely something that is still on the to-do list for kind of cleaning up the application forms that we have and kind of, you know, trying to be able to get it more, right now, some of them are 5 pages long, trying to get more like a 1-pager in Seattle. It is still on the to-do list. I think it would kind of center more on my department than on the specs and what works.
Right, yeah, I just, with it, talking standards, you know, if you're building a book of standards, you know, that's obviously a separate deal, but.
Yeah, I think that it's still the intention for that sort of product to yield. Maybe after we get the code cleaned up that we're working on a lot, we have a pretty aggressive schedule for that to get done by the end of the year. Meet councils to establish goal for that. So it might be more of a early 26 item for us to be able to those cans and then getting those out onto our website and keep them available.
Yeah, I understood Frank Mella a couple last year before redid it for Sumner. And so was saying that, you know, there's an opportunity where we might be able to duplicate theirs and make our own modifications to save us several steps in that process. So.
Yeah. I don't mind copying the work.
Cut and paste, get paid, on we go. All right. Anything else beyond standards? Nope. All right.
Hi.
Project management.
Good afternoon. So an update on the Kansas Street Southwest reconstruction. The city received the 100% plan set and estimate last week. We will review it during the month of July and determine the additional funding needed to request from TIB at their September meeting. We have 2 TCEs, temporary construction easements to secure still, and there's about 3 more utilities that need to be relocated. So still working on getting the utilities out of the way so that we can go to bid and figuring out where we're at with our budget, but we're making progress.
Okay. Do we have a rough order of magnitude of what the increase in budget is currently?
Probably about 2 million.
Out of what was the previous?
We got a grant from TIB for a little over 4 million. And the total project estimate right now for construction, just for the contractor's contract, doesn't count any engineering or inspection or anything, is 7.1 million. So some of that's covered by TIB, some of it's utility funded. So we're working through figuring out where all of those impacts are right now. We thought it was going to be closer to 4 million, but it came in a lot higher. And I think that's because of escalation. The grant request might have been a little underestimated when it went into TIB. So we're just trying to figure out how to fill that gap right now.
I have a ballpark idea on all-in cost.
One moment, let me pull up my spreadsheet. I think it's going to be around 8 million. Yeah, with everything. And that would be the construction contract, construction engineering, construction management, inspection, any special inspections that have to be done.
You said we started out at 4
Yep.
and then we thought 6 and now we're pushing 8.
Yeah, the TIB grant we have is for 4,420,000, and that was for construction engineering and the construction contract and a little bit of right of way. And right of ways come in higher, double what was estimated too.
Because right now, like, I know the bridge is a separate project and they're different projects, but as far as the scale, at 7.5 for the construction contract, at 7.1, we only got 900,000 for all the add-ons, and we have a couple million already over at the bridge. So is that 8 million a realistic number? And it's probably not something you're prepared to get into detail about, but just the quick math in my head says that we're probably looking at closer to 9 if we have a build cost of 7.1.
Maybe you're 8.5. That's the number we're still. We got an estimate in May that was like 7.5 million for construction, but now this 100% estimate came in lower. So we're trying to figure out why it's lower, and last week. So we're still kind of combing through that.
So what would be the possibility of getting a little presentation at study session on our Kansas City stuff?
Yeah, I could do that. Sure.
That would be great. Some pictures. I got
Okay.
some questions from other council members and, just like the 5-foot sidewalk and that kind of stuff we're curious about. But mainly just keep us abreast of what's going on. So we're ahead of the game, especially when we're seeing this price
Yep.
up and up. I'd like the council to be well aware of it.
Yeah, sure. I'd be happy to put a presentation together. Maybe talk about the funding, where we're looking at the estimates coming in at and where we're
Yeah.
pulling the money from. Sure.
Yeah, maybe show us what it's going to look like.
Yeah. Yep. We can do that.
Okay. Under 2 hours.
I'll
Thank you.
keep it under 10 minutes. How
Yeah.
about
And
that?
then, before I forget, on the hydrant flying, it went great, right? I mean, you got way ahead of schedule, didn't have to do some nights. So community members, I feel we're not in the loop exactly what the expectations are when funding's going on. I know you can't say, well, this night we're doing Calistoga, because you don't know what your actual schedule is, but can we see something that says, okay, we don't want you using the water from this time to this time? And then if we get ahead of schedule, is it possible to say no flushing tonight? I know, but I understand we want to stay on track and not make it confusing, but just explain to the constituents exactly what the expectations are. I think we've kind of forgot about that. You know, in the past it was don't turn your water on. And of course, somebody that sits next to me a lot panics if I brush my teeth, you know? So, okay, thank you.
Yeah, we can definitely update our notification process and but we'll make sure that the messaging is a little bit more clear and detailed there a little bit further in advance. But yes,
Oh.
your concerns are noted, and we definitely want to make sure that we are reaching out and providing adequate notification to include our flashing reader board sign and all of that. So-
Yeah, that'll be nice use for our new reader board sign. And maybe some photos of what the flushing looks like so people aren't wigging out, you know? So,
Yes, we've got some pictures that have been collected, some by Ashley, some by our staff, and we'll make sure that we provide a much better detailed notification process for next year.
okay, thank you. I appreciate it.
It seems like they were doing a pretty good job, whoever was pumping out the Facebook notifications. There's a lot more. It feels like this year there's a lot more communication, like, hey, there's a road closure. Hey, the bridge is gonna have, temporary traffic impediments or whatever, but yeah, no,
So,
the open flow of info has been pretty good.
I would say a lot of the project specific things are Ashley. More of the day-to-day operational type of notifications are usually coming from me to Danielle and Kim, who are working on the public information officer side of it for the city. We'll give them the great template and then they church it up for us and move forward. One of the bigger things that PIO is going to start pushing out, probably starting next week, will be notifications about it's summertime, it's peak water usage. Shouldn't water your lawn during the heat of the day, water in the morning or the evenings, stuff along those lines will start to go out as well. Just good information that doesn't necessarily make it out very often. And I know we didn't push that information out last year, so we're trying to make sure that we have some stuff set in place that automatically kicks out down the road in future years too. So.
Big kudos to Daniel and Kim. They do all of our posting. They'll schedule things out for us and stuff. Big thanks to them.
Yeah, it's been a long time coming, so thanks. Keep it up. It's really nice to see something.
Anything else?
The only other thing I was gonna say is the Foothills Trail redesign, the realignment of the Foothills Trail went to CGA and it'll be a study session. So you'll look forward to that study session as well.
Okay. Public Works.
All right, over to me. Provided some handouts to you guys. We're going to talk about it more so in the action items under, I believe it's number 10. But I'll just kind of hit the recap of our meeting that we had with our contractor this morning. They are working on putting on the concrete forms for Pier 1 and getting ready to start building the vertical portion of the walls for that pier. They're moving along at a pretty good pace there, staying relatively on track with their schedule. Granted, their schedule got modified due to the shaft anomaly investigations and the repair process there. We're looking at potentially second week of August, closing the highway intermittently one evening in order to pick the girders and get those placed on top of those two piers. We'll be working on a public messaging campaign here pretty shortly with WashDOT. Provided everything stays on track and on schedule, we're looking at most 2 15-minute approximate full closures of the highway, just so they can pick up the girders and get them turned and placed. And then it'll be single lane closure, pretty much a couple of hours on either side of that in order to get the cranes set up and all of that. So we're making progress there. The item that I passed out to you as far as the bridge goes is just a update for shaft investigations and the repairs, and it's more related to the agenda bill that is for discussion here in a little bit. So just wanted to make sure we get you guys all of the most current and accurate information as we know it to date, as far as those costs between the shafts that we, the city, have taken responsibility for versus the contractor's responsibility at this point in time. So if you have any questions on that, we can discuss them now or during the conversation with the agenda bill.
I'll wait till the agenda.
No need to beat the dead horse twice.
Sounds good. Utility rate study RFP, I've got it all drafted. I've just got to finalize a couple of comments from Scott and our team, and then we'll get that published early next week and move that down the road. Next up in the packet, if there are no questions on the rate study, is a topic just for discussion concerning city versus contracted construction inspector. Ashley and I put our heads together with our team and just kind of wanted to share some insights when it comes to how we're doing construction inspection itself, not managing of our construction project portfolio, but the actual on-site inspector. So I've got a staff memo as part of the agenda packet and just wanted to share some of that information that we've got based on current projects as well. So we'll just kind of start off. Currently, the city depends on external engineering consultants for construction oversight, paying hourly rates as high as $250 an hour. That is based on our on-call contracts with SCJ and Parametrics. This memo just proposes an alternative, establish a dedicated in-house construction inspector who will provide consistent quality assurance at a fraction of that cost overall. Consultant inspectors, as you can see there, typical rates for our two on-calls vary based on experience of the inspector. For example, on the SR 162 evacuation bridge project, Parametrics billed $380,000 for 2,440 hours, total of 2 inspectors for an average of $156 an hour. Building capacity in-house. For us, an in-house inspector employed directly by the city would perform the same work for approximately $70 an hour at the fully burdened rate, pending HR confirmation of those. That person would then be able to provide local knowledge and continuity across all of our different projects, be able to provide faster response and coordination with city staff, direct accountability and daily progress reports via a future project management system, and would report basically to our capital projects manager and myself. Also, the ability to build institutional processes and standards. On page 2 of that document, you'll see the estimated annual cost for that future employee, should the council approve something along that lines. More than half of these costs can be offset through grant-funded projects, construction services, or enterprise funds as well. Like Ashley was mentioning with Kansas, some element of that is funded through TIB for construction services. So some of that would go towards this potential future employee to pay their wages. Also, the SR 162 project case studies listed there in a section down below, where you'll have Parametrics currently $380,000, but the equivalent in-house cost there could be $170,000, netting a savings of $210,000 for the city. Also keep in mind with our construction management contract with Parametrics, it's one person on one project, whereas a city inspector would be inspecting multiple projects, like those listed Kansas the washed out water line relocation, the trail realignment project, the White Hawk Boulevard extension, any pavement preservation projects that we have, the biosolids facility project, water and sewer line replacements, that'll happen eventually, and more from our 6 to 10-year project capital portfolio currently in development. So there's a lot of potential that our own inspector would be able to multitask across multiple different projects and support the city's overall capital improvement program. Why it matters most? There's benefits to hiring an in-house person, saves hundreds of thousands versus consultants. Not that I don't like our consultants. It enhances quality assurance and grant compliance, builds internal capacity and long-term project consistency, and flexible funding via the grants and the utilities. So depending on what project they're on would determine where funding would be coming from. Things to consider, does require a budget amendment if this is something we wanted to go after now. And staff onboarding, we do have a position description already generated on our side. And HR is working on validating the pay range amongst other neighboring utilities using AWC's rates for certain types of positions. The project workload must remain steady for full utilization. That is one consideration. So I've got to make sure that our public works staff and our team collectively with our engineering team have a good pipeline of projects to keep them gainfully employed out there doing inspections. But if we were lacking on something along that lines, we could always augment and support Tim and Kim's efforts should that workload be really large on the building side. Training, equipment, and onboarding times required for a new staff member, but I would see that as probably marginal. It's our recommendation that the council support a budget amendment to fund a limited term public works construction inspector. And as long as things worked out, we could potentially move that into a full-time, non-term limited employee. The proactive investment would save money, improve construction outcomes, and support our capital delivery with greater control. That's all I have.
So the limited term would be for, what do you think? We're under contract for inspector at the bridge, correct?
Yes, and we do pick up 200 days of inspection on the bridge.
Towards the end there.
Yep.
Right, so we could transition if we found somebody there. And then also, would you move them into Kansas project then? Is that the idea?
Yes, they would just bounce from one project into the next and so forth.
And that would kind of give us a limited time there, about a year, you think, or is that what you're thinking, or? Oh,
And that's like a year of calendar year.
But do they ever really last that long? What we plan for, there's always longer, but
I mean, that would be their contract, right? It's at the start to see if it works out.
Yeah, I would probably be looking to do something similar to our GIS technician, to where we might do just a 3-year term limited with the potential to become a full-time down the road, just to make sure that it's working out the way we expect it to, and be able to go forward with that.
I think we definitely are experiencing a surge in growth in the city as far as projects go. We haven't seen like this since the 90s with all the developments that popped in. And there's been this big lull, and now all of a sudden we have all this stuff going on. I think it's fully justifiable to bring somebody in short term. My only fear is do we keep adding people to the city staff? How many FTEs do we, when it's really convenient to start adding FTEs, and you're just growing the city government more and more and more. And so as a contract position, I think it's fully justifiable, because we have a surge in construction that's not going to be sustainable past a couple of years, maybe a decade. But that would be my only thing, would be, do we continue to grow government, or do we contract somebody? But I think you definitely need it. I support having it in-house. So,
Thank you. And I guess over to Scott.
Yeah, so we'll bring back budget amendment in September for review, and then we'll have to approve the budget amendment for comparison.
yeah, one of the, oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead, you finish.
On the subject of like inspections and things, so recently, we know that the school needed parking, and at the end of the school year, you got kids parking everywhere, and parking complaints left and right, Safeway, you know, every road around the school. And the school put down hog fuel, and they tried to create a parking lot, but because there was a wetland impact, they had to pull it. But then you drive by the bridge and you see what was their laydown yard that was fenced out. And then they're just cruising out into a whole bunch of wetland type vegetation that's actually wetland type vegetation, as opposed to where the school was doing it. And so when I drive by that, I question, I'm like, well, why does the city get to just have absolutely zero TESC measures, and they can just drive wildly anywhere they want on site? And even when it was raining, they're dragging mud all over the place. And yet the school district, we're not working with the school district to help provide parking. And so looking at inspections, you know, my expectation would be, regardless of who's inspecting it, they would be looking at that, because if that was my job site, I'm sure I'd see an ecology inspector show up with a little notebook. And so, you know, why is that okay for the bridge project, but not for the school district? So I'm not looking for an answer. I just wanted to point that out. And it would be super awesome if by the next school year, we could find a way to maybe make an exception for the school district, or somehow work with them or something, because obviously they need the space to do the bridge. I'm not arguing that point whatsoever. But if the school can't do it, the city shouldn't do it. We should have an equal standard is all. And so, that's all I have on that one.
Would you like an address of some of what you said?
Sure.
You're right, but there shouldn't be a difference in the expectation standard of how a critical area or buffer is treated. And, you know, this is the first time hearing of it. We can certainly take a look at what's going on out with the bridge project to make sure that the city is in compliance with our own critical areas ordinance. But it does apply to us as well. We don't get to an exception to that. On the matter of working with the school to creatively find solutions for their parking, that deserves an address as well. The school was informed of some options they have at their disposal for being able to kind of work around the strict application of the critical areas ordinance that required them to take out the hog field they could lay down. The school's hope is that they wouldn't need to invest any capital in kind of chasing down those sorts of solutions, because their hope is that they'll be successful in their bond this year, and that will allow for them to build out their more holistic, you know, big school where they have, you know, an actual form plan already designed for more than sufficient parking. The school is also up against their own burden from a cost perspective, because there are state provisions that don't allow for them to budget and plan and develop around anticipated growth, or growth that they see coming in, you know, from Topoli and South Hill, things like that. So there's a lot at play with school and their parking, but they were made aware of things like critical area variances that they could have applied for and maybe had a good case for. They just didn't want to invest the capital in something like that, because they knew that in the end that wouldn't be where they relied on their parking. Instead, what they hoped is that they could work with the city on a different sort of creative solution that allowed for parking elsewhere, which they did do, and we did work with them on. In fact, the superintendent of the school district sent an email to the mayor and you know, gave, I thought, fair kudos to Scott and I for the creativity that we applied towards being able to find a parking solution. What they ended up doing was requesting an administrative interpretation to be issued by me that allowed for our code to be read, the parking requirement for high school to be read as applying to grades 10 through 12 and not freshman class. And so, you know, with that sort of interpretation being looked at by Scott and I, we felt like with a straight face, we could see reason to that. And the school's, intention was to kind of, give guidance to their students to park in a number of places. Some on-street parking where it's allowed in the city because you are allowed to park in the right of way, so there's not for more than 24 hours. Safeway's calling kids out of there by themselves, Safeway's managing their own problem, they've got this, a tow truck on standby, I think. And otherwise, the school made the good point that they can rely on the connectivity between the middle school and the high school via the Foothills Trail. The parking is so prolific at the middle school because of the stadium, but the stadium is used during the school day when the high schoolers are coming to the school. So they started just telling high schoolers, you know, there's no parking here, park at the middle school and take the Shoelace Express up the Foothills Trail and then, you know, come to school that way. So there are an abundance of solutions that have been worked through between the city and the school for the parking. And I think that right now, the school knows that there are other options, but they're leaning heavy into an expectation that their bond's gonna get approved and they're not gonna need some sort of temporary fog fuel solution.
Right. And trust me, I fully well understand like the role that you have and that the staff has in following the guidelines that are, you know, the prescriptive guidelines that are out there. 100% can't fault anybody for that. But for the average Joe that doesn't sit in this meeting and doesn't hear the explanation and doesn't understand the fact that there's a standard or that there's a wetland map that says you can park here, but or you can use this land in X manner, but you can't use this one 100 yards away. You know, there's a lot of things as a representative of the citizens and not the staff that I see just as myself as a citizen when I drive by it and I'm like, those trees indicate there's water, telling me that's a wetland type space, number one. But if you go over to the old Gratzer property over there, or Gratzer or Ingford, but where the house was, and they've parked there and it's different vegetation, it's on a hill, it's not a wetland per se. Now you can get a biologist to say, you can argue one way or the other, and I understand the game there, but with the naked eye, you look at the two areas and you say, well, which one should not be parked on? And in my opinion, by a long shot, the area that the city's parking on, or the city's contractors are parking on, and where the school parked or was trying to create parking, they weren't allowed to do that. And so looking at that through the lens of the layperson that's driving by there every day, or every guy that has a work shirt on that's going to work driving by that every day, because there's a lot of guys like that here in town, they look at that and that's what they see. So the perception, regardless of the reality, but the perception is that, well, city can do whatever the hell they want, and school can't, and they're creating a parking problem and the city's the bad guy. And I'm not suggesting that that's the case. I'm just saying that that's the optics of it. And so if we can be perceived to be out there being even more proactive, and if the school's not, you know, taking you up on the parking stuff, you know, the citizens are pissed because there's people parking in their front yards all over town. So maybe we put out a statement that says, hey, we're trying to work with the school district. If we can do X, Y, and Z, please reach out to your district representatives to help alleviate the parking problem in town. I don't know what the proactive solution is, and I'm not telling you guys what to do. I'm just saying that the optics of it, it's kind of a tough pill to swallow. And then
I understand the point that you're making.
and
Yeah.
the salt in the wound is driving by on Friday morning and there's nobody even there working. Or you drive by at 8 a.m. and the crews are just getting done drinking coffee, and then you drive back through there at 3:30 or 4 o'clock and they're rolling up and heading home. They're not even there for a 10-hour work day. You know, and so I do hear people voice these concerns about parking, about, you know, the bridge, and that's just the Cross You Bear as an elected official in town. You know, that everybody knows you. I'm sure Greg's heard stuff about a million other things too. You know, the phones ring and people gripe about stuff. So they don't always give you guys that feedback. So I guess
We do hear some of it, and you know, some of it we put out, you know, we say like Whitesville right there next to Safeway. There's a pretty wide shoulder and there's a protected sidewalk with a crosswalk across the highway. If a kid were to park their car on Whitesville right there for less than 24 hours off the road, but in the right of way, and then use the sidewalk system and the crosswalk across the highway to be able to get to school, to us, it's kind of a win. It's a
Right.
good solution.
And-
So we talked with Ed, superintendent of the school about this and with the principal out there and said, yeah, that's good guidance to give to the kids. There's nothing illegal about it. It's a far better solution than saying, yeah, park in Safeway and,
Right.
maybe you'll be okay. I mean. you
And
know,
s-
there were a lot of issues too with the hog fuel lay down. How are kids gonna get in and out of this area? Are we gonna put a pork chop here? I mean, JC and I were out there with the principal of the school and with their contractor trying to be able to see like, are we even gonna navigate kids in and out of here? There's no, there's a light right there, so we have limited options of what kind of sort of infrastructure we can put here. We're gonna put a pork chop. How are we gonna tell kids coming into town from the north side how to get in here? What are we gonna do? Navigate them through the residential area on the west side of the highway and it's just, it wasn't well thought. It wasn't coordination. School and the city, I think, are both, have an expectation that the coordination moving into the next project being better thought and worked through, collaborated with. And I hear the point that you're making about the public perception. That's
Right.
certainly something that we deal with all the time. It's good to hear the feedback, and I'll take a look at the wetland map and see what we've got going on at the bridge site. We're required to comply with our critical areas ordinance.
Yeah, and to the point of parking on Witzel there in the wide parking strips, we also had 2 pedestrian strikes there. So, oh, you want my kid to park there and drive on the most dangerous crosswalk in the city? I mean, so, and again, not that anything you're saying is not accurate. I full well got it, but again, it's perception. Perception becomes reality, unfortunately, and I think I've said before, wherever the city can find a win with public perception, it's worth it. If we can, there's a reason why public officials are allowed some discretion in some scenarios, because sometimes the black and white of the rule might not be the best answer for the better good of the community. I don't know all the details as much as you, the conversations and all of that, but just wanted to get some feedback.
Scott and I chased down feedback that we get all the time too. We were out there on Varner. We got, feedback from one house on Varner about the kids parking on the street there. We walked up and down, we talked to every house on Varner in person. And all but one said, we're happy for the kids to park here if they want. We just want for the kids to be able to get to school. There's just no issue with it at all. And so sometimes, this week we will pick the grease. But we go out and we investigate that, and a lot of times we hear a lot of positive feedback from the public and a lot of understanding about the complications that we're working through.
Okay, that's all I got.
The biggest issue I saw with the hog fuel dilemma was accessing 162. Don't you have to get a permit from the state? There was a whole lot more going on than just dumping some gravel.
Do we have a permit to enter 162 for the project since Rocky Road is closed officially? Public
Yeah.
traffic?
Yeah, we'll watch that coordination on traffic control for that project.
Well, I mean, and I don't know the answer this time, but just to understand it. So if you have to have a permit to enter 162, do we have to have a permit for the project? Or is that included? I mean, because traffic control plans, that's a whole different animal.
What do you mean a permit for the project? So the whole entire project has been approved by WashDOT, review, engineering, coordination with traffic.
I guess let me step that back.
Yeah.
I'm not concerned about that, about the bridge.
Right.
My question is do you actually, if you're gonna add access to the right of way, do you have to get a special permit from DOT that is a access permit?
WashDOT has ingress egress authority through boarding, so that any new points of ingress egress will be coordinated with WashDOT. So if you're on existing driveways are already, but if like a new commercial development is going to provide a new point of ingress egress, yes, WashDOT will provide review and approval of that.
Okay.
So my last question is, how much area did we give Quig Brothers for laydown area?
So that was actually an agreement between Quig and the school district,
Okay,
and the city of Ording itself had no part in that lay down conversation.
okay, because
The only thing that we did on behalf of Quig is communicate with the school district and just facilitate the two parties engaging in a conversation. What Quig requested should be really what was originally fenced off. And I'll be talking with the contractor to figure out, hey, what do you guys actually have from the school district? You probably want to talk with the school district, and then we'll put our heads together on the critical area portion to make sure that we're good there.
Honestly, wasn't worried about that. The point was that if they're being self-policed, you know, and not picking on parametrics by any means, but if the groups that's construction managing it is also inspecting it and that doesn't get addressed, you know, when we're talking about inspections, it
Yep.
supports your point to have an in-house inspector to separate party. That's kind of where my mind was going, and I think I probably wandered too far off the trail. So I apologize. for that.
And you're good there. It is actually called a WashDOT access connection permit for ingress and egress on or off the highway, but yeah. Kim?
Area out there, the parking is occurring far outside of the breadth of even the most, I mean, even if there was a wetland mosaic or, you know, bog out there, they would be more distant than, it wouldn't require a buffer distance for parking out there, so. From a technical perspective, we're in the green. I hear your point that sometimes what's understood to be by the public, by their perception, isn't aligned with what technically is right and wrong, and so. If it would be helpful to be able to take advantage of a bit more of Ashley and Danielle and Ken's skills putting out public messaging, I can definitely work with them to be able to just get out a message that, you know, tries to kind of dispel some of the concern.
I don't want to go down the rabbit hole much further, but I will say that most of our maps, if not all of them, say that all of our wetland maps say that you have to self-verify them because they're done based off photography and other ways. They're not done by a biologist actually going out and looking.
This one
Is that, okay, fair. I was not aware of a new map that had that.
specific to the
It's
school
project
district,
specific.
Okay.
project, there was one done.
Yeah.
So that one has 150-foot buffer, based on measurements that were 360 feet away.
This is a project specific one that was prepared by PWS. This is totally verifiable, and yeah, we can use this as a basis for code action. We did out at the field site. I think what you're thinking about is like GIS, like you go onto Pierce County GIS and people hold Dane County.
City of Wetland maps. And that came up in the church, the wetland stuff. So I studied a lot of the stuff that we had at the time. But
But the point that you're making, I hear loud and clear, and like I said, if it'd be helpful to put out some sort of public messaging or, you know, exercise. And this was a bit of a rabbit hole, but an important one if you're getting feedback from the community, and so. If it would help to be able to put out some messaging to the community that kind of addresses some of the concerns and dispels them, and I'm happy to work with you.
sure. To put a bow on it, it started with inspectors and self-policing. And then I rabbit holed it. And what it ended with was the perception of the parking situation for the school. So my apologies, but that's the way my brain works.
Well, let me finish the rabbit hole. Remember, Gratzer property has 6 to 8 feet of fill on it. Used to look down into Gratzer property to see the cows. So.
I think my grandfather buried a Studebaker.
Okay, end of rabbit hole. Come on.
There really is one out there though. Okay. Where are we at? Back to Public Works. Public Works construction expenditure. Okay, the wastewater facility update.
Yes, for our update there, had a good meeting with both Wilson Engineering and PSE, talking about our electrical feeds to the projected project location and site. It's a little bit complicated because you have the existing facility, the new proposed facility, and the public works facility that also is fed down to well 4. So there's a lot of electrical work that would be going on down there. We're actually looking in the proposal from PSE is to underground our electrical feeds for all of that complex that we have there. New feeds going to the new facility as well. We look at a potential being on generator for a little while they're making those permanent connections in the underground vaults and all of that. Right now, we're still working towards getting that 90% design. I don't necessarily have the latest update on that time for delivery there, but we should be seeing something pretty soon. Everything's going pretty smooth there. The facility's looking good from the last pictures that I saw and some of the other side conversations that we've had. One of the elements that we had to go out and use our ground penetrating radar to identify with our sewer staff, and Ashley got to witness it kind of firsthand, was locate some of our force main sewer lines that run where the building is essentially going to be placed. So we were able to confirm what line is which and which pump station it's being fed from in the neighborhoods to the north side of the city. We're making progress and things are moving in the right direction. So the one thing that is slightly concerning there is at the 60% design, we had a $34 million construction cost estimate from Wilson Engineering. That leaves us a pretty significant shortfall between what funds we have from the Public Works Board loan, which is 10 million, and then the city funds that are currently sitting in our account, which is about $9 to $10 million. So we'll have to figure out how we want to kind of close that funding gap as we move forward.
What's the big increase from the previous budget?
Not entirely sure. Just some of it is time and construction costs.
What, do you remember what it was? I
think we had
to say.
So I know the 90% design that we had from Parametrics was 18 to 20 million.
I think the last time I was involved with it, we were thinking it was gonna go up around 26. So, but I mean, if 26 to 34, I mean, now we've doubled from what we were originally thinking. Once again, our projects are doubling. That's a tough pill to swallow. So. Especially because that's the whole city budget for the year, basically, for 1 year. So. Okay. Any update on well one?
Well, one is scheduled to be pulled on July 10th. So after next Wednesday's meeting, I'll have more information once it's extracted.
Are they or were we able to source the parts in case they need to be replaced? Would there be a potential delay?
I won't know until we get it all the way out of the ground. I have some suspicions on what's malfunctioning and needs to be repaired, but I don't want to necessarily say specifically, because it could be any number of combinations. It could be the pump down below. It could be the bearings on the shaft that help to keep it in alignment so it doesn't vibrate. It could be bearings on the bottom of the motor. Just there's a lot of complicated things in there that I really need to put eyes on with them as things are being extracted. So as soon as we've got that information, I'll provide an update during study session.
You didn't mention Gophers.
Gophers.
Sure.
They're all out of High Cedars.
Oh, okay.
The golfers.
Thanks.
Caddyshack.
But I am definitely looking forward to getting into the well, getting a camera down there to see what the condition is, as well as a full assessment. So it's very, very common practice to make sure that we're doing, anytime you're in a well, you camera, you clean if you need to, and restore as much of it back to its original condition so you get the maximum gallon per foot of drawdown out of the water source. Typically every 20, 25 years lifespan on a well, usually somewhere in that range is when you want to get back in there and do some good rehabilitation. So.
No, we're right there right now, aren't we? That lifespan.
We're
that
not
quick?
quite there yet. From what I can tell, records wise, it was last replaced in 2009.
All right.
Hey, Ryan, since we're on the topics of wells, can you
Yeah.
update us on the cemetery right here?
Yeah. And then at the cemetery, we have a well that's used for the irrigation system itself. over the last couple of weeks, our staff have been working to validate what's going on with that well itself. The well was tested and it stopped producing water for us up there at the cemetery. We do have a budget line item for irrigation up there. It's $20,000. Right now, I'm working on refining the quotes with different vendors so we can get out there and get that one pulled and replaced. It is much smaller. It is a submersible well, so I have only electrical related ways to troubleshoot the well pump itself. It's about 210 feet down and would need to be extracted most likely due to its small 2.5-inch diameter size. Repair versus replacement options, those costs are probably going to be pretty consistent, with repair being more expensive is what I anticipate. So again, with that one, I can't necessarily go through and do irrigation install up there as originally planned this year due to the fact I can't pressure test and check for leaks in order to properly backfill. So we're working towards getting a contract kind of in place to extract and use that existing budget to make sure that we have an irrigation system that's functioning.
Anything else?
No, just a few things for us.
Finance.
So we just submitted $920,000 in reimbursements to WashDOT for the bridge. We've been submitting small amounts for the other projects. So White Hawk, we just submit whatever is being worked on at that point to keep our grant active. And I'm putting together, with the help of Ashley and Scott and Ryan, a sources and uses report for the projects that we're working on to give you guys a better idea of what the total project cost is, all in one page, and then what the sources are for the funding for those projects. So you have an idea of where we're spending our funds and when those funds are coming in. So hopefully have that in the next meeting. We'll have everything finalized. So you guys have a better idea of what's going on. Still working on finalizing June, so there isn't any updated information for that. That will be in Finance Committee, and then in the council meeting, we'll have financials for everybody to see.
Okay. You. All right. New agenda bills. So I went through the Safe Streets one. I don't have any questions on that. You?
Yeah. Well, so we're ready to go approve it at council, or?
Yeah, so it's coming to you first. We've worked through a competitive procurement process of request for qualifications. We received 4 statement of qualifications from 4 different firms, and Keller and Associates was selected to prepare the plan. The Safe Streets for All program supports the U.S. Department of Transportation National Roadway Safety Strategy and the goal of 0 roadway deaths using a safe system approach. So that's what the plan is that they'll be working on. And they'll be looking at, things like principles of a safe system approach include looking at deaths and serious injuries as being unacceptable, realizing humans make mistakes, that they are vulnerable, and responsibility is shared, but safety is proactive. So it's mostly looking at strategies we can look at to make our streets safer, and that we can build those strategies into future projects. The Safe Streets for All program has an implementation aspect to it, to where after we have the plan, we could apply for grant funding to implement some of the things that come out of the program. Maybe it's more rapid flashing beacons, or we have more crosswalks or more roundabouts, like whatever. Once we come up with the plan, then we can use that to apply for additional grant funds to implement whatever the strategies are. So this is, we received $120,000 from Department of Transportation. The city is paying $30,000 as the match, so it's $150,000 grant total. The contract is for $147,500, but we're asking for the full not to exceed of $150,000, so we have a little contingency. So this will get them going.
Okay, and then it's about a year
Yeah,
of
they
that.
have a year. We actually have we have 3 years to complete it, but I think it won't take the consultant
Right,
that long.
I saw that. Yeah,
Yeah.
you got, once you get the grant.
Yep.
Do you think that will have an impact on, I mean, we're gonna do Kansas, and what if they come up with
Oh.
ideas after we're doing Kansas? What are we gonna do?
Well, we could add things later. We were already adding some rapid flashing beacons at crosswalks on Kansas, but we could always apply for grant funds to make improvements out there too.
Okay, that was
Mhm.
one of my concerns. I mean, we're spending a lot of money and then
Yeah.
we're gonna have this stuff come out of nowhere that we should do this and this and this. Let's see, so I see they're showing in their thing that they got Ording listed in here already, so that must mean they think they're getting the grant, they're getting the job.
This was their presentation they gave during
Yeah.
the interview portion of the
I
competitive
see that.
process.
The
Yeah.
presentation pretty much matches their scope of work, but
Mhm.
yes.
Yeah.
As they presented it to us, which was quite interesting to see, as well as some current accident data from the data center as well. One of the things that we would do with any of the contractors that were selected for the Safe Streets for All grant, we would be providing both our pavement management plan information that we have, our ADA transition plan, all of that information that we have from current studies to help facilitate the development of the Safe Streets for All program itself, to include the modifications that we're doing on Kansas.
Okay.
So trying to make sure that we help as much as we can with the information we already have in order for them to provide us with a great valuable resource to help guide our overall streets program down the road.
And they'll form an advisory committee that'll, weigh in on the ideas, and we'll have some open houses, and they'll come to council and present. And then there'll be, would like to have it, I don't know if it's an ordinance adopted, but some sort of council commitment to the program is part of the requirement for the Safe Streets for All program through the USDOT.
Okay, I see they said in their presentations, our fee doesn't grow unless you ask for more stuff.
Right.
Okay. Lori, you shouldn't give me all this stuff. I like, it's gonna, the problem is, when you get this stuff, you can't really see it, but
Yeah.
it'll be interesting to see. Did you guys get to look at some crash data yet, or they haven't presented that till they get a contract?
I haven't really seen much crash data, but I'm still pretty new at the city.
So on slide 17, granted, it's a little bit small. It says scope of work is task 5 countermeasure toolkit, and I'll come over with my laptop because I can make it a little bit bigger. They did include our crash data
Mhm.
as examples.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, they had a lot of ording examples in their presentation.
They did a great job
Yep.
tailoring it to the audience, and yeah, you're looking at it there. And then they had more detailed intersections that they grabbed just one or two and came up with some
Mhm.
suggestions on the Kansas-Calistoga intersection. Which
Okay.
at that point, they didn't know that that will be a future roundabout
Okay.
down the road.
Okay, that's what I was aware. Yeah, I was just so I can put that page away because I was gonna ask that next. And then they do keep mentioning the pumpkin fest instead of, what are we calling it now?
Harvest Festival.
Harvest Festival. Okay. So this schedule will be modified that they presented to you because it's showing it's starting in June. So
Mm-hmm.
it won't start till we,
They won't
sign
start
it.
till August now. Yeah, so the schedule will just slide 2 months. That's
Okay.
correct. Mm-hmm. And that's learning on my part, because when I put the RFQ out, I thought I could have the contract executed by end of June. But it's taken a little longer than I thought. So there's just a learning lesson on my
Yeah,
part.
okay.
Yep.
Cool. And then let's see. They show quite a few of their projects they've done. That was, for some reason, I marked. They showed the study in Lewiston, Idaho, and all the things they did. I thought that was interesting. And then, questions and answers. So did you smoke them, make them ask a lot of questions? And then,
We had a lot of questions. We did have quite a few questions, actually.
okay, and then, so this was mandated in 2023?
But I
or
think
it's
we
a-
received the grant in 2023.
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so then we have 5 years to use it or something,
Mm-hmm.
or to get it going?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, I think that staff competed for it in 2023. When I got here, it needed to be obligated. So we found out early in 24, I believe, is how that went.
okay. Pretty broad or not broad, they're adamant about how the process works, the consultant, the owner.
Mm-hmm. The Safe Streets for All program's pretty prescriptive too on the elements you have to have in your plan. There's definitely a lot of boxes that
So
the
that's
US
like-
DOT gives you to
Yeah,
check. Mm-hmm.
federal mandate
Yep.
stuff. Okay, and then they said committee meetings, and then we decide who's going to be on the committee. Is that right?
Yeah, we'll tell them who we want to have on our advisory committee. That's
Okay.
correct. Yep. They'll tell us the type of stakeholder groups they would like to see, and then we'll select the staff that has time,
Okay,
or council, or whoever it ends up being.
and then they're going to look at, they say they related documents, ADA stuff, pavement, wastewater, water management stuff. They actually kind of look at that.
Yeah, we'll provide them all the management plans that we have for them to look at, so they can
Okay.
kind of see what we already have in our plans.
So it says they're going to assist in coordinating infrastructure planning across city system. And then it lists owner responsibilities and assumptions. Then let's see. I just marked owner responsibilities a bunch of times. I'm almost done.
You're good.
Oh. At least choose, not me. And I use an excavator for my rabbit hole. And then their final fine print. At the request of the owner, the following is the estimated invoice schedule based on how consultant currently anticipates completing each task over the duration of the project schedule. The schedule assumes that work will begin in the first week of, now it's not June, it'll be when
Mhm.
the contract's signed,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
And will need to be updated based on the actual date of the notice of proceed. So that's instead of when it shows June, that's what it's going to be. And then it shows their fees for the process, which is understandable. And I think I left the federal stuff alone. And that was the main thing I was concerned about was Kansas.
Mm.
I mean, we're paying 150,000 and we're building at the same time
Mm-hmm.
type of thing. So, okay. thank you.
I don't see us ripping anything up out on Kansas Street, like,
All right. Well,
yeah.
I just,
We're already putting in some pedestrian safety features out there.
Yeah.
And then there'll be a White Hawk roundabout coming in, so. But we'll see. I don't think we're gonna tear anything up, though.
yeah, no, I just don't want. them-
No.
Yeah, throw something out there in the middle of the whole thing and parametrics.
And that was one of the questions that I had for them was, and really for all of those that we interviewed, was we already have these data sets available. How are you going to incorporate existing data into this planning document to provide value added to the city? And all of those projects that we're aware of within the city limits that we've got plans for will be included in those too. Even if they're not necessarily all the way to fruition yet, we'll include that.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You generated a couple of questions, man.
Uh-oh.
Didn't have any. Okay, first question is, do we have the ability to channel their efforts? So in other words, if we already have parametrics studying Kansas and we already have parametrics studying 162 at the bridge, or, you know, they've looked at these traffic patterns and all that sort of stuff, they've incorporated their own safety measures. Are we going to have somebody that's going to go out there, second guess their work and then create more work that we got to deal with? Or as they do their risk assessment, are they going to be notifying us of risk that we then have to respond to and then incur new projects to address because we've been made aware? So back to the original question, can we focus their efforts?
Well, they have to follow the Safe Streets for All program. So that's really what their efforts are going to be focused on. There's like 8 things that they have to go through. But we will provide them any information that we have, so we're not duplicating efforts. Like if we have information from another project, we're happy to provide it to them. And I think the risks that'll come out of it are going to help us be able to apply for funding under the Safe Streets for All implementation program. So I don't know that it's necessarily a bad thing that we know about the risks. We'll just be able to somehow mitigate those in our future designs or through additional grant funding through the Safe Streets for All program.
Okay, so we can't focus them because my thought process was, according to this, the 100 block of Calistoga West looks like probably the one area that's like the most accidents, followed by right here, and then Williams Boulevard at 162. 162 at Williams doesn't have a construction project currently pending, so maybe if they took a fresh look at that. I don't think we have anything that's in design phase for Washington and Calistoga at the moment, but we have the parts.
The trail realignment project will touch that.
And so, but if they don't have a design yet, is that an opportunity for them to do some of that front work? But same thing here, we don't really have a project going for this. So that was where I was thinking, rather than saying, yeah, sure, cruise on down to Kansas and tear up JC's design and tell us what else you want. And then now it's causing rework and that somebody's already studied it and looked at it. Why do it again?
I think in the focus groups, we can definitely try to direct like the intersections we think that they should probably focus on more than others. So I think there is a little bit of opportunity for that, as long as we check the boxes that go with the Safe Streets for All program.
And if I can add to that as well, it's going to be driven by data. And that crash data that they have, plus talking with our police department as well, that's going to really drive the areas that they're looking at, those that have the most significant counts in a period of time. I believe it was 5 years, I think, if I
Yeah, I think
remember
you're right.
correctly. But they may actually go back potentially up to 10 years in data to figure out, okay, man, there's a lot of side swipe vehicle crashes at this location and a lot of pedestrian involved type of conflict here. They're going to pretty much ignore those locations where there's not necessarily those, and primarily those major points that you saw on the document in that have the big circles around it with the different colors. So that's more or less, I think, to answer your question, they're going to focus on those areas more so than they will work that Parametrics is doing or elsewhere. Plus, we'll be able to provide a little bit more guidance and steering. So.
Yeah, and to that point, that what the example that comes to mind for me, we just got one with WashDOT and they looked at every intersection along the entire 162. So to your point, you know, with the materials identifying lanes in 162 as a trouble area, you know, we've already got some data and design ideas and time to spare thoughts from WashDOT on what would be best for that intersection, but they were looking at what would be best for that intersection and then kind of a systematic approach to improvement under an entire different scope of work, an entire different, you know, project area there that just ran along 162 from Oregon to 410. And that was under a pretty, you know, strict scope that aimed to do 5 things. It wasn't necessarily trying to be able to look at something from a perspective of how it would, you know, a study that aligned specifically with the guidance of the program that actually outlines. There may be a little bit of overlap, but it may be that there's intersections that are being studied in different lines.
Thank you, Kim.
And I know like, so when our guys respond to a call, accident scene, they have to fill out a state patrol accident form and that data goes into the state patrol's database. It's accessed in the CAD or it's entered into the CAD so that it can be used by DOT and everybody else. So they can break it down, not just by saying, well, there's been 42 accidents there. They could say there's been 42 head-on collisions, 42 collisions with a left-hand turn, you know, whatever that number is and the type of collision so that we can look at the specific design criteria. So I don't know how deep of a dive they do, but that information is absolutely available. So.
Yeah, I know they're gonna look at all of that information. In what was in their packet, they didn't necessarily dive deep into that element of it, but they can definitely get that granular and help us identify the most likely causes and ways to prevent that. So.
Good to move that forward. Study session. Yep. All right. Bridge investigation. This is
All right.
so I read through it. Did you get a chance to read through it? Maybe easier just if we have questions. Otherwise, just move it forward and let the council discuss it.
Sure. I think we understand what our responsibility is and where we're headed with the contractor, right? We realize we're on the hook for certain repairs. But we're questioning
Right.
some of the other stuff.
Yeah, and I think based on what I read in here, I think when it gets to study session, I'm sure there's going to be conversation about it. So I don't know. I don't think there's anything new, I should say, presented today, but I would think we just move it forward and let the discussion happen.
Okay.
Okay, so we're moving that one forward. How about the Fish Passage? Washington State DOT's all-time delay master championship project.
Let me get to that here in my packet real quick.
We should actually get like a ribbon and give it to like whoever actually shows up and says, "Yeah, you can do something." Blue ribbon. Thank you for the love.
We'll just make sure it's a fish.
Going mom style. I like it.
Yeah.
No salmon on this.
Anyway, back to the topic at hand. Got agenda bill 2557. This is the washout water line replacement design, scope and budget with parametrics. The summary statement will start with city staff and parametrics have been working closely with WashDOT to meet the utility relocation requirements for the upcoming 162 improvements south of the city. The new roundabout at Orville Road and Pioneer Way intersection and the Fish Passage culvert replacements at Card and Roush Creeks. To comply with our WashDOT franchise obligations, the city must complete a design to relocate approximately 1,300 linear feet of existing asbestos cement water mains. The new 8-inch ductile iron pipe will be installed in 2 different sections, about 1,100 linear feet at Orville Road intersection across Card Creek. It'll be all in front of that Baxter property right there. So it's an opportunity for us to get rid of a good chunk of AC water lines that we need to get taken care of. And then at Roush Creek crossing, a little bit farther down 162, you're looking at about 200 feet in total distance. This work will be included as a separate schedule within WashDOT's project bid package through a subsequent final design utility agreement, which I expect to receive probably sometime next week. And that agreement was reviewed by the city attorney in March of 25 for administrative approval. Design will be completed by December 2025 and submitted to WashDOT for inclusion. They are projecting advertisement in February. So what you've got before you is also the map of the site for Orville Road Roundabout and Pioneer Way. It's kind of, I'm not sure which copies you have there, if they're the color or the gray. But I've highlighted the areas where the water line would get replaced.
I don't think I got a copy of that agenda bill.
It's there, it's on the back of. It was
Oh, there we
on
go.
the
It's a memo.
grid
Got it.
tracking sheet. So we're looking at 2 crossings, correct?
Yes, 2 creek crossings, and my apologies, I didn't mark on the map where the crossing is there.
Oh, isn't that right over here somewhere?
So
What's that far back?
it's around in here, but they're realigning that whole entire creek crossing on this whole part.
Mhm.
So that will be all new kind of alignment there.
Okay. My wife rolled the car right in front of Baxter's in the ditch there in the 80s. And when the car got towed, the house opened up and water rushes out, and there's little salmon in there. So,
Well, I'm hoping she was okay.
no, they spilt the waffle batter. It was a good thing. Other than that, yeah. But I couldn't believe her. Well, it does have fish in it.
Yeah, and then the second map is farther down. I believe that's Roush Creek that's farther down. Thank you, JC. That one there, they'll actually be, in order to install the culvert, they've got to realign the road to install the culvert, and then they'll redirect traffic back onto it. But you will see on the next page is the scope of work. The total cost effort for parametrics to complete that design is $145,000 in time and everything. We're looking at 30% design, a 90% design, and then we'll go to final for incorporation into the contract. Based on our approved purchasing policy, for any work that's under estimated $200,000, we can use our on-call contract for that. We elected to go with parametrics for this one because they've already been embedded and working with WashDOT towards getting that design knocked out. So we greatly appreciate any questions that you guys have and approval so we can get moving in the right direction by the end of the month.
There hasn't been any budget allocated to this already yet, right? Or is, I get where I'm going with it is basically, have you guys been just going to all these meetings for like 5 years to?
We had a small scope of work for preliminary engineering and analysis that we've been using. I think it was for the 40,000. So we did some preliminary, which are now extinct because they've changed their alignment so many times. We did some preliminary alignment, looking at that, and then just it's been washed out for missions.
Probably burned that fee just telling us that nothing's happened.
Yeah, there's a bars number already assigned for this work.
So this culvert coming off of the west side of Orville that hangs a left and comes towards town right before it crosses over by the reservoir there has been a flooding issue that's been brought up since like Greg Reed way back.
Back to Galen and well before that.
Question being, is there any do we have any, or do we have any conversation about having a project to deal with that and address it?
We've got in the, it's in the countywide flood control, project list.
Okay,
Yes, there's a project identified that's listed.
okay, so that's in for this year's call for projects, or,
It's not in for all for projects, it's just identified as a future project.
okay. So it was in the original risk assessment deal, okay. Um,
And it's, the other challenge is it's in the county, and so the city doesn't typically do a lot of, effort in county projects unless it like is contiguous with the city, like I think a good example is the Village Green Outfall.
sure,
But this one would be 100% in the county, so we probably just lobby Lewis County.
well, I'm just thinking because if that's our water main, you've got this fish culvert project, and then you've also got a roundabout being designed. Is there opportunity for us to incorporate our project to get that discharge and address it rather than let everybody build their roundabout and then dump it right back into the culvert? Millions of dollars get spent and they don't fix the problem.
I mean, they would have to address stormwater as part of their project, so they can't leave it worse than it is.
Right, they all do some more modeling and, we got for this and, their current manual, and it would have to be, looking at infiltration or LD. So just direct discharge isn't likely. I think, you know, the opportunity at some point, the city stands to this 50% design for the roundabout. We'll be able to review the drainage plans at that time associated with whatever design they're proposing for this. Then the culverts, for the setup.
I would just make the subtle request that every time we see those drawings that we address this issue and see if we can't get some kind of resolution to it without having to pay for it.
There's also at the corner there is a catch basin that regularly fails, and then it ponds, and then in winter months becomes a hazard because the ice comes over the highway there. So hopefully an opportunity to improve that picture as well.
So we can comment on it when they send us a plan, and
Yes.
then it's part of the detail probably.
Yeah, you'll be able to give secret comments as well. I don't know if they've advertised for anything with regard to the project yet.
Okay, but that would be another opportunity to provide on.
Okay. And then anything else on this one, Fish Passage? So. Okay, so this is a not to exceed 150. So out of curiosity, not just pertaining to this, when we put these agenda bills together, a couple of things that we had tried to put together that you guys have gotten pretty good at is putting the budgets together, and so we can see kind of where the money's coming and going from. Do we have the ability to post the contracts with those? And the reason I ask that is because not just on like, as we look at services, as we look at different things, you know, do we have a full understanding of what we're buying? We approve it and we say, yeah, we're going to spend not to exceed 150,000, but that not to exceed 150,000 can be to attend one meeting and that's it. And we don't know what we're buying. If we have a copy of the contract, we know what the scope of work is, but the scope of work doesn't include exclusions and all that kind of stuff that's in there. And so, can we do that?
The on-call contract? Is that what you're looking for?
Maybe probably, well, I guess maybe not in this case, because if it's an on-call contract, then that's a repetitive thing. But like, as we go out for these, you know, and it says not to exceed 150. So if I take a contract in and I have a scope of work and it's just a on-call services, I wouldn't necessarily have the opportunity to list out my exclusions. And so if it comes back that, well, we weren't, we were only going to attend 5 meetings, but now we've exceeded that, now we have to go. So now you've bypassed the mechanism in place to authorize that contract by council, because it started out as a on-call, but then it migrates to change orders that exceed that. Granted, those change orders would have to come to council. And it's not specific to this, or it's just in general, like, because I know when we've had discussions about the dam, we go in and we have conversations about like, what are we buying? What specifically things are we doing and what are we not doing? And I think if we have a clear picture of that when we sign these over, just like the budget, where's the money coming from? Doesn't matter who we're contracting with. It's just a matter of awareness, I guess.
I can answer that a little bit if you like.
Sure.
So typically a scope of work, at least when we provide them, we'll have assumptions with regard to number of meetings, hours allocated to field work, things like that. So like this one in particular, it's a scope of work that's a specific task under the on-call. The contract itself for professional services is gonna be pretty consistent for any parameters project, whether it's this one, SCADA telemetry, it's just a professional services agreement that we use as a standard template, or if we have special negotiated terms and conditions with individual cities, so roads insurance, paying insurance, things like that.
Sure.
The details that you're looking at, like the number of meetings, all that will be detailed in the scope of work. And as we have project review meetings with city staff, if we start to see scope creep, schedule creep, those types of things on both sides, then we have that conversation like, hey, you're asking us to attend 20 meetings versus 10. Do we have budget reallocation we can make, or do we need a scope of budget amendment? So that's how we manage that, but typically all of these assumptions are in the individual scope of task or project.
All right, and let me try to articulate that a little differently. In this case, I'm less concerned about the on-call services contract to do this stuff. You guys have been working on this thing for God knows how long, and it drags on and on and on. So the red flag here for me has nothing to do with the contract. It has nothing to do with where the money's coming from. The red flag for me on this job is DOT stretching this sucker out to an infinite amount of time, and the council having a clear understanding of, oh, well, yeah, we bought and paid for that. It's good to go. And then all of a sudden, 3 years later, we're sitting here and we're like, why did this contract double? Well, the contract doubled because you bought this. And so that's the knot that I'm trying to tie, the bow on this thing that I'm trying to put together, is that how do we go into it with our eyes wide open as to what we're buying on our projects? And because, some projects are getting, hey, we had a lift station that failed and JC's got to jump in. It's on-call services, no problem, in and out, open and close job. This is going to be this all-time string bet of the year. And it's just going to keep going and going and going. And it has already. And so I just want to see if there's a way to quantify that so that we're eyes wide open. I don't have a reason to pull this up. I think it should move forward, but
I think, projects like this, because I'm, just thinking back to the history of it, it started as kind of a preliminary investigation of and coordination with WashDOT of what we could do out there and some the design alternatives. And when we originally presented that scope and budget to the Public Works Committee meeting in council, in my mind at least, maybe it wasn't for council, but it was clear that this was preliminary work, and that as WashDOT progresses and kind of aligns with what they want to accomplish, then there'll be a subsequent scope of work to do the actual design work. And then at the same time, there was discussion of like, how is construction going to work? Is the city going to be responsible for construction? Is WashDOT going to add it onto their contract? And so that was an unknown at the time. And so, especially under like franchise agreements, like we have almost no control over kind of how this work progresses. Whereas kind of a discrete project like, maybe the Safe Streets for All, like we know exactly what's going to happen and when it's going to happen. Or design of a lift station, there's, it's our project, it's all confined as city responsibility. So we have a much clearer path to understand what that is. I just don't know with this project, how we could have,
How do you put a goalpost on it?
yeah, how do you put a goalpost on it when, I mean, I think we're all, you know, from a staff perspective, we're feeling the whiplash of WashDOT on this. I mean, this is definitely the tail wagging the dog, so. I don't know. I mean, I understand your frustration.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's just a matter of,
Yeah.
you know, this is a tough thing to
Yeah.
quantify
Yeah.
because nobody knows.
It's 100% sloppy. I don't know how staff did it when you done things.
Like Ryan said, we're assuming that it gets done in December of this year, and we'll close coordination with staff and as WashDOT develops their design. We can obviously provide updates at this meeting on our schedule. So.
And like I said, I mean, I don't particularly have any issue with any of
Right,
this. It's
sure.
just a matter of like containing our in-house process. You
Yeah.
know, how do we put goalposts on
Yeah.
something so that we know we're gonna get this far for this much money and then
Yeah, I mean, that's the challenge with when it's in a franchise agreement, and I know that like PSC experiences a little bit of that with us, like they don't, like we can call them up tomorrow and say, hey, move this facility for this project, and you know, they're paying out the nose until they figure out exactly what, you know, how we want the facility located, so it's just the challenge with being a franchise utility.
move forward.
Please.
All right. Okay, telemetry. Time check, we got 10 minutes.
Okay. Challenge accepted. Let me get to it here. Staff recommends approval and funding authorization for the telemetry master plan to begin the process of modernizing and integrating the city's water, wastewater, and stormwater utility systems. This initiative directly supports the council's third adopted goal for 2024 and addresses critical operational and infrastructure needs. I've got a staff memo as well. Continuing without a master plan, not the design portion just yet, but the master plan would lead to reactive, inefficient upgrades with higher long-term costs and greater risk of failure. This proactive data-driven approach provides a strategic framework to guide the future investments, improve service reliability, and enhance public safety. So moving on down into the memo, just to provide a good synopsis there. We put this out for bid twice over a period of about 6 weeks. We had one proposer, and that was Parametrics. And in talking with City Administrator Larson and the team collectively, instead of spending additional time going back out looking for more potential proposers, we'd like to recommend going with Parametrics and utilize essentially the on-call engineer portion of the contract for the scope and budget. This project actually would be divided into 2 phases. The first would be a system assessment and master planning element, which primarily is how are we going to bring the system together into an effective communication avenue for both security, video cameras on the sites, and operations of all of our different sites. The second element of that would then transition into the design with selected alternatives. Those selected alternatives would be along the lines of, do we do fiber within the city and then microwave, or satellite, or radio communications? And then further building out the overall network, which would also include with that design would be standardized panel designs for all of our systems. And then as we go into each well site, lift station, et cetera, we'll bring it up to that current design standard. So for example, well 2 currently is just an emergency source. I know when we get through the water system plan, we're going to need to do some serious investment in that water source. 1, to bring it into the network, and 2, to provide the right amount of communication and control. So that design element that will come after the plan will help spell out exactly how we're going to do that, make it easier for us to do those integrations and ensure system component compatibility across the board. But this current scope for the master planning portion includes project management, system assessment, and one of the things that JC and I and Glenn, their SCADA telemetry expert, we made sure to incorporate time for them to validate and assess all of the current information that's available to us from TSI and other vendors to make sure that we aren't repeating surveys out there in the field, similar to other conversations we've had in the past. Reviewing that documentation and making sure that those conditions are adequately summarized in the overall plan itself and identify any of those data gaps. And that will lead us into the second portion, which is the master planning document itself. They'll develop and evaluate up to 4 alternative solutions for the telemetry infrastructure and that network connectivity. They'll provide site-specific upgrade recommendations and a high-level system map and architecture. I will tell you, based on my experience at Joint Base Lewis McChord, having the planning document as that roadmap and framework is a huge step in the right direction for us as a city. We integrated close to 25 different reservoir storage sites that were not integrated into a system whatsoever. And then we went into construction, and by the time the system was done, I was able to operate that same exact system that we designed, which was great to do. So I'm looking forward to doing something along that lines here for the city. And it'll also produce a capital investment plan with a preliminary schedule and -30 +50 cost estimates. They'll also deliver that draft and a final for city input. And then once we've got that, we'll know what that design effort's going to look like. So that's all I have at this point.
No, I looked through it. Let's put it to study. You got anything?
I do. So for 2 years, we've talked about this SCADA system and trying to get it fixed. And I've stated many times, even offline with you guys, that I was hell-bent for leather to get this project off the ground and get it going. But you guys told me multiple times that we couldn't do this because we didn't have all the studies done for the stormwater, the sewer, and the water. And you had to have that data in order to put the SCADA system together. And we don't have those 3 studies, and we have a proposal. And from what you described here, we didn't have any other bidders when we know that we had interest from multiple firms to do work on this system. Because I worked on it and I met with them. So I am not prepared to support this moving forward as is. I am very much a proponent of, I want to expedite this process and I want it to move forward. So I'm the last guy that wants to hold the process up. But outside of this room, there's a lot of other stuff happening that all circles around this. And so at this time, I'm not prepared. I'm not prepared to support it moving forward. So it's, in fairness, if Councilmember Hogan wants to move it forward, it'll go to study session, but I will speak against this moving forward as it sits. So and I think if this moves forward to a study session, I want to make sure it's on the record that I'm requesting that this conversation, only because of the stuff you're aware of outside this room, this is probably an executive session conversation. My 2 cents. I don't have anything against parametrics doing it. To be clear, the issue that I have is these single bidder option only. I'm not okay with that. I think we need to have other opinions on the system. And yeah, I think that's all I have.
Your suggestion then to get more interest in the project? Cause we bid it twice, we put it in Puget Sound Business Journal, we put it when we advertised in all our kind of legally required places. I think we reached out to several vendors that have the capability of doing this work. And we received one proposal. So,
I mean, if this was my project, it would take me not a lot of work to go find bidders. So, that's not my role. My role is the policy side. So I have, what staff does with how you procure bids is not our purview. It's not mine. But with a single bid on a project that I worked on that I know multiple vendors were interested in, I'm not okay with just accepting the fact that we only have one bidder. And it's not a personal issue with anybody or any firm or anything like that. It's just due diligence as far as I'm concerned. But that's my opinion. Doesn't mean the council shares that, and Lord knows that council has disagreed with my opinion before. So if it goes forward, it goes forward. But I'm just being transparent in my position. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I want to hear from the rest of the council, and you can voice your opinion then.
Fair? Okay, so it moves forward. Simple as that.
thank you.
All right,
Okay.
on to us. Do we have anything to add? We have exactly 3 seconds.
So Laura, we're, Safe Streets where's it going? Or you,
Safe Streets for All, moving to study session. The bridge, moving to study session for the change order. Post passage roundabout design, moving to study session. And telemetry master plan, the CMR disagrees to moving forward, but requests executive session and Councilmember Hogan, the study session here from Mr. Council. That's all right.
yeah, but I don't, I think we let council decide at study session if they feel it's exact, or if we have whoever determines that. Is that,
Yeah, I mean,
Fair
it
enough.
should be the whole council would determine what happens at study session.
Yeah.
so. Just to maybe clarify our request on the bridge, we are requesting that moves to the next council meeting, because we're trying to get a change order for the investigations approved, so that we can bill it as part of fiscal year 2025 work. Otherwise, it may not be grant eligible if we approve it after later on. So,
Yeah, I think we agreed to move that forward
Yeah,
for full council discussion.
okay.
okay, just fine.
so that's going to the next regular meeting.
Okay. Anything else? Roundtable review? All right, I think we're adjourned.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.